In first class, silence was broken by a voice colder than the air outside. "You don't belong here." 9-year-old Eli Parker froze, clutching his crisp first-class ticket. His sister, Maya, 12, stared in disbelief. A flight attendant's manicured hand pointed toward the economy cabin. Passengers shifted, whispers sparking like static. In row 1, a woman smirked. 3 rows away, a man in a tailored suit glanced at his phone, expression unreadable. 30 seconds later, this flight wouldn't just leave late. It wouldn't leave at all, and neither would 42 other flights across the country. Eli Parker's legs dangled above the plush carpet, his small fingers gripping the crisp first-class ticket like it was a golden pass. Maya sat beside him, her back straight, eyes scanning the cabin with a quiet caution that belied her 12 years. She'd been on enough trips to know when a room was watching her, and the first-class cabin of Aurora Prime Airlines was watching. Whispers pricked at her ears. The hush broke as Samantha Blake stepped forward. The lead flight attendant's navy blazer was flawless, her bun pulled tight, her red lipstick sharp. "Good evening," she said, though her voice lacked warmth. Her eyes flicked to the tickets in Eli's hand, then back to the children's faces. "May I see your boarding passes again?" Maya's brow furrowed. "We already showed them at the gate." "I understand," Samantha replied, each word clipped. "Sometimes mistakes happen. Let's just verify." Eli offered the ticket, his small fingers reluctant to let go. Samantha glanced down. The bold black letters, First Class 2B and 2C, were undeniable. Still, her smile thinned. "That's unusual," she murmured. Maya stiffened. "Why unusual?" Samantha straightened, her eyes no longer pretending kindness. "You don't belong here," she said flatly, her hand gesturing toward the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the plane. Eli blinked. "But these are our seats." His voice was small, but the tremor in it cut through the cabin. Across the aisle, a woman in pearls smirked, leaning back with an expression that made Maya's stomach twist. A businessman 2 rows up adjusted his tie, muttering to no one in particular. "Told you." "Please gather your things." Samantha's tone was final. Eli looked to Maya, searching for an answer, but Maya's jaw was tight. She stood, her movements sharp, the ticket still in Eli's hand as if holding on to proof of a truth no one cared to see. As they stepped into the aisle, the cabin's silence deepened. A few passengers looked away, uncomfortable. Others watched like it was an inevitable scene they'd seen before. Samantha moved ahead, her hand lightly touching the curtain, holding it open as though shooing them away. In the rear of the plane, near the last row of economy, a man sat alone. His attire was understated, his presence almost invisible. But as Eli and Maya passed into the cramped cabin, his phone rose slightly. A quiet chime sounded as his camera captured every second of the exchange. His face betrayed nothing, and no one noticed him, except perhaps Maya, who for just a second thought she felt his eyes follow them. The hum of the engines faded into the background as Maya slid into her cramped economy seat, her jaw still tight from the humiliation. She opened her phone without a word, her thumbs moving quickly. One word. Now. She hit send. Hundreds of miles away, inside a private lounge at O'Hara International, Jonathan Parker sat alone at a polished table. His charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, his watch understated but expensive. In one hand, he cradled a glass of water. In the other, a phone buzzed. He glanced down, saw the message, and his expression didn't change. He typed back a single response. No punctuation, no sign of urgency. Understood. No one in the lounge would have guessed that message was enough to shift the course of a multi-billion-dollar airline. Jonathan set the phone down, reached for a leather portfolio, and slid a document aside to reveal a slim, encrypted device. His fingers rested on it for a moment, almost idly. His face betrayed nothing, but the quiet weight of his stillness spoke volumes. Back on Flight 409, Maya slipped her phone into her lap. Eli leaned close. "Did you tell him?" "Yes," she whispered, not looking up. "That's all we have to do." Far above them, tucked behind the glass and steel of Aurora Prime's operations center, a very different kind of phone buzzed. Marcus Hale, a junior systems engineer, noticed the encrypted alert. Normally, such alerts were handled only by top security, yet the code had pinged his monitoring console. He hesitated, glancing around. His supervisor was nowhere in sight. His screen displayed an unusual signal routed through the company's secured network. At the center of it was a familiar name, Parker. Marcus's pulse quickened. He knew that name. Everyone in corporate aviation knew that name. Biting his lip, he pulled out his own phone under the desk and sent a quiet message to someone saved in his contacts as Director V. Subject: possible Parker trigger, from O'Hara. The reply came seconds later. Keep eyes on it. Do not interfere. On the lounge floor, Jonathan closed his portfolio, rose from his seat, and walked toward the private corridor leading to restricted access gates. No rush. No outward sign of confrontation. But his phone stayed in his hand, screen dark, ready. Back on Flight 409, Maya's gaze drifted to the rear cabin. The man with the phone in row 32 hadn't moved. He was still scrolling, still quiet. She couldn't tell if he was just another passenger or someone waiting for the right moment. She looked back at Eli and offered a single word, the same one she'd sent to her father. "Now." Samantha Blake smoothed her navy blazer as she walked back toward the galley, the faintest trace of a satisfied smile on her lips. To her, the situation was handled. 2 misplaced passengers redirected, 1 first-class cabin restored to its natural order. She'd been doing this long enough to know when a disruption was over. In the cramped seat of row 32, Maya Parker wasn't convinced. Her hands clutched the first-class ticket like it was evidence in a trial no one else cared about. She could still hear Samantha's words echoing in her head, the condescension heavy as lead. "You don't belong here." Beside her, Eli stared at the back of the seat in front of him. His feet barely touched the floor, but his jaw was set, his small eyes bright with something far older than his age. Anger. A soft ding overhead announced the plane's departure delay. Samantha didn't notice. She was busy explaining the seating correction to another attendant, her voice low but tinged with pride. 3 rows back, the man with the phone in row 35 shifted slightly. His camera was already open, the screen glowing faintly. The earlier exchange, the confrontation, Samantha's tone, the visible discomfort of the children, was all neatly saved. His thumb hovered for a moment, then tapped twice. The clip was sent. On the other side of the country, in a cluttered office above a coffee shop, a group chat titled Airline Watchdogs pinged alive. User, Sky Ghost. New one. Flight 409, Aurora Prime. You'll want to see this. Within seconds, the footage played across multiple screens. The group, known for exposing racial bias in the airline industry, began dissecting every detail. Samantha's face, the smirk of the woman in pearls, the visible tickets in Eli's hand. User, Jet Lawyer. Timestamp it. Cross-reference Samantha Blake. I've seen her name before. Back on the plane, Maya shifted uncomfortably, her gaze sliding toward the curtain that hid first class. Eli leaned closer. "Do you think Dad will?" "He already is," Maya cut in softly, her tone certain. At the front of the cabin, Samantha poured coffee for 2A, her smile tight but practiced. She didn't see the ripples forming beyond the fuselage, didn't feel the undercurrent she had unknowingly triggered. In row 35, the man checked his phone. A single check mark turned into 2, then a small notification. Delivered to Watchdogs HQ. His lips curved into something between a smirk and a grim line. Maya caught his glance for a fleeting second. She couldn't tell if he was friend or stranger, but she recognized the look in his eyes. He wasn't here by accident. Inside the restricted operations suite at O'Hara International, Jonathan Parker stepped into a room that hummed with quiet precision. Frosted glass walls, brushed steel counters, and the faint sound of servers filled the space. A single biometric scan unlocked the workstation before him. He slid the secure device from his pocket, docking it into a hidden port. The screen shifted instantly. No airline branding, no commercial logos. Only the black and silver interface of Sentinel Protocol. A map of active airspace lit up, routes threading like veins across a dark background. Jonathan keyed in the flight code, AP409. A moment later, a red marker flared on the map. Ethics alert, priority level 2. His jaw remained still, but the slight narrowing of his eyes spoke volumes. The alert window expanded automatically, replaying the first 30 seconds of flagged audio. Samantha Blake's voice was crisp, cold. "You don't belong here." The algorithm didn't need more. The violation was logged. Jonathan tapped the screen again, expecting the alert to isolate Flight 409. Instead, the system pulsed, highlighting 3 additional aircraft in bright red. Flights AP227, AP611, and AP508. All Aurora Prime routes, all broadcasting priority level 2 ethics flags. Jonathan leaned back slightly. 3 simultaneous alerts. That wasn't chance. That was culture. On the far wall, a secondary display scrolled through logged triggers. Passenger displacement. First class to economy. Crew member verbal discrimination. Unauthorized reassignment of ticketed seats. He opened the cross-check panel, scanning for patterns. The timestamps were aligned within minutes of each other, across multiple airports. Back on Flight 409, Maya shifted in her seat, sensing a change she couldn't name. Eli stared out the small oval window, unaware that 3 other flights now shared their fate. Jonathan keyed a secure channel. "Sentinel, confirm pattern." The system's synthetic voice responded, calm but unyielding. "Confirmed. Aurora Prime systemic breach detected. Recommend escalation to Tier 3 audit." Jonathan's hand paused over the console. Tier 3 wasn't a correction. It was a controlled detonation, but not yet. He closed the alert, allowing the red markers to hover on the map. His expression didn't change, but the shift in his posture was subtle, like a man positioning a chess piece he'd been waiting to move for years. Elsewhere, in Aurora Prime's network hub, Marcus Hale stared at his own monitor. The unusual traffic spikes he'd flagged earlier were now pulsing into active alerts. He didn't know what Sentinel Protocol was, but he knew one thing: someone high above his clearance was moving the board, and Aurora Prime was suddenly on the wrong side of the game. Jonathan didn't pick up the phone. He didn't demand a meeting. He didn't even call Aurora Prime's CEO. Instead, his fingers moved in measured precision over the Sentinel Protocol console. One command appeared on the screen: initiate silent audit. The system processed the input, its quiet efficiency almost understated. Within moments, code pathways began rerouting through Aurora Prime's operations grid, creating deliberate slowdowns in data confirmation cycles. Ticket scans lagged by seconds, then minutes. Crew scheduling platforms froze intermittently. Gate assignment systems threw error messages. To the outside world, it looked like a mild technical hiccup. Inside the airline, it was a pulse of confusion that would only grow stronger. At Gate C-19 in JFK, a departure board blinked twice before showing delayed. At Logan, baggage handling queues began timing out. At LaGuardia, gate agents refreshed screens only to find logins looping endlessly. Back on Flight 409, Samantha Blake stood in the galley, pouring coffee for a first-class passenger when her intercom buzzed. "Blake, cockpit!" The captain's voice carried a clipped urgency. She set the pot down and stepped to the phone. "This is Blake. Operations just flagged us," the captain said. "System-wide technical issue. All Aurora Prime flights are on staggered delay. Stay alert for updates." Samantha frowned. "System-wide? Since when?" "Just came through," the captain replied. "Management's trying to pin down the cause." As she hung up, her work phone vibrated. A direct call from her base manager. "Blake, we've got a situation." His voice was tense. "It is calling it a network slowdown, but command says it's unusual. Everything's lagging. Don't make waves on board until we have clarity." Samantha's eyes narrowed. She didn't like unusual. She prided herself on control, and control didn't include mysterious slowdowns mid-flight. In row 32, Maya glanced at Eli. "Something's happening," she whispered. Eli tilted his head. "With Dad?" Maya didn't answer. She didn't have to. Inside the Sentinel control suite, Jonathan leaned back slightly, watching data stream across the screen. A calm green light confirmed. "Silent audit in progress. Network degradation at 22% efficiency. Escalation path available." Jonathan tapped the console once, then closed the panel. No calls, no press, no confrontation. The first move was already on the board, and Aurora Prime hadn't realized they were in the game. Aurora Prime's network slowdown was no longer a quiet glitch. It was a spreading storm. By mid-afternoon, departure boards at 5 major airports blinked with yellow and red alerts. Delayed, hold, route pending. At LAX, a gate agent tried to calm a restless crowd as Flight AP-227's boarding stalled for the 3rd time. "We apologize for the inconvenience," she began, but her voice was drowned out by groans and angry shouts. In Atlanta, passengers at Gate E14 pulled out their phones, recording the chaos. Clips began circulating on social media with captions like "Aurora Prime Meltdown" and "Flights Frozen Nationwide." Within hours, hashtags were trending. #Aurora Grounded, #They Belong Here. At a cafe near LaGuardia, members of airline watchdogs were refreshing feeds, watching the situation unfold in real time. Then, a new notification dropped into their encrypted group. User, Sky Ghost. Pulled this from an old passenger complaint archive. You'll want it. Attached was a shaky cell phone video from a year earlier. The setting, Aurora Prime Flight 508. The cast, Samantha Blake, standing in first class, lips drawn in a tight smile. Her voice was unmistakable. "I'm afraid these seats aren't available to you. Please move to your assigned section." The camera panned down to show a middle-aged black passenger holding 2 first-class tickets, confusion and humiliation etched into his face. The audio picked up murmurs from surrounding passengers, but no one intervened. Back in the present, the clip exploded online. Comment sections filled instantly. "Pattern of behavior. This isn't her first time. Aurora Prime protecting repeat offenders. Ground them all." On Flight 409, Samantha's phone buzzed relentlessly in the galley. She glanced at the screen, frowning as a flood of notifications appeared. Tags, mentions, and a familiar headline. "Repeat allegations surface against senior attendant." She quickly locked the screen, forcing a calm expression as she stepped back into first class to check service. But passengers were already whispering, their eyes following her movements more closely now. In row 32, Maya saw the change in atmosphere. She nudged Eli. "It's starting," she murmured. Eli tilted his head. "What is?" "People are watching," Maya said simply. In the operations suite, Jonathan Parker monitored the news streams alongside the cascading delays. His expression was still unreadable, but the faintest shift in his posture suggested the silent audit had done its work. Aurora Prime was no longer just experiencing a technical issue. They were stepping into a full-blown credibility crisis. In the cockpit of Flight 409, the captain's headset crackled with an urgent transmission. "Aurora Prime Command to AP-409. Hold position. Directive update. Crew reassignment authorized." The captain frowned. "Reassignment mid-ground hold? That's unusual." The reply came colder. "Orders from compliance. Effective immediately, current crew is relieved of duty pending investigation." He turned in his seat, exchanging a glance with his first officer. There was no room for argument. "Understood." In the galley, Samantha Blake was mid-sentence explaining the delay to a passenger when the intercom chimed. "Lead attendant to the cockpit." She smoothed her blazer, forcing a confident smile, and stepped forward. The captain met her at the door, his voice low. "Blake, we've received an instruction from command. You and your team are to disembark. New crew will be boarding." Her brows knitted. "Disembark? This is a temporary delay. I can manage first class." "It's not optional," the captain interrupted gently but firmly. Within minutes, murmurs rippled through the cabin. Passengers craned their necks as Samantha and the other attendants retrieved their bags. She kept her chin high, her stride measured. To anyone watching, it looked like a procedural change. But just beyond the jet bridge, reality shifted. Two uniformed compliance officers waited, holding slim black folders. "Ms. Blake," one said, his tone formal. "You are being placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Samantha's composure slipped slightly, though she recovered quickly. "Investigation? Over a delay?" The officer opened the folder, revealing a printed page with her name in bold and multiple flagged incidents beneath. "This is not a routine hold. Your case has been referred to the Federal Aviation Ethics Board for review." Her breath caught. That wasn't internal discipline. That was federal. Back on the plane, a replacement crew boarded, moving efficiently to take their positions. Passengers exchanged glances, whispers growing. In row 32, Maya leaned toward Eli. "That's not just a delay," she whispered. Eli looked puzzled. "How do you know?" "Because they didn't replace her. They removed her," Maya replied, her eyes narrowing. On the tarmac, Samantha was escorted down a side corridor, her phone buzzing relentlessly with calls she couldn't answer. The officers guided her toward a restricted area, away from the public terminal. For the first time that day, Samantha Blake realized she wasn't walking back into first class anytime soon, and maybe not into any cabin at all. In Aurora Prime's executive conference room, the tension was suffocating. Monitors glowed against the dim light as senior leaders crowded around a polished table. Every phone was silenced, every voice hushed. The main screen flickered, and Jonathan Parker's face appeared. His suit was immaculate, his tone calm, almost detached. "Good afternoon. I believe we have matters of compliance to address." The CEO, a tall man named Caldwell, forced a diplomatic smile. "Mr. Parker, perhaps we can discuss this." Jonathan raised a hand slightly, cutting through the pleasantries. "Aurora Prime Flight 409. Multiple violations under Passenger Equity Statute 14C. Ethics breach confirmed at Level 2. He pressed a key, and the screen filled with evidence. Time-stamped footage, ticket scans, flagged audio of Samantha Blake's words. The room fell silent. "Furthermore," Jonathan continued, 3 additional flights within the past 24 hours have triggered similar alerts. This is not isolated. This is systemic." Caldwell shifted in his chair, glancing toward his operations chief, Marla Dean. Marla leaned forward, voice smooth. "Mr. Parker, perhaps there's a misunderstanding. These events could be isolated staff errors." Jonathan's expression didn't change. "Your internal systems might spin that narrative. Sentinel Protocol does not." Marla's smile faltered slightly. "Sentinel Protocol?" she echoed, feigning ignorance. Jonathan tapped another command. A separate screen lit up, displaying Marla's recent internal communications. Several flagged messages showed her instructing managers to resolve customer optics quietly and avoid escalation to compliance review. The color drained from her face. "Those are taken out of context." "Context," Jonathan interrupted, "is exactly what Sentinel provides, and context shows an active attempt to suppress investigation." Caldwell's gaze darkened as he turned to Marla. "Is this true?" Marla stammered, searching for a defense, but another alert chimed on the screen. "Sentinel Protocol? Officer Dean. Clearance suspended. Pending federal ethics review." Jonathan's tone never shifted. "Aurora Prime's issue is not one employee. It's culture. Culture you've allowed to persist." The room was heavy with silence. Caldwell straightened in his chair. "What do you want, Parker?" Jonathan's gaze was steady. "Immediate cooperation with a full audit, public acknowledgement of the breach, and compliance with the Passenger Equity Charter before the board forces it upon you." No one in the room argued. The quiet sound of the compliance officers entering the hallway was all the answer they needed. By sunrise the next day, Aurora Prime's trouble had left the boardroom and spread to every corner of the industry. The FAA issued a formal notice. Aurora Prime Airlines, temporary suspension of federal route authorization for 6 primary corridors pending ethics review. The announcement was short, clinical, and devastating. 6 corridors accounted for nearly 40% of the airline's revenue. Markets reacted immediately. At 9:31 a.m., Aurora Prime's stock opened down 14%. By midday, it had dropped to 22%. News tickers across financial networks ran the headline, "Aurora Prime faces ethics freeze." Airports scrambled to adjust schedules. At Miami International, ground crews rerouted aircraft bound for New York and Chicago. At Dallas-Fort Worth, gates assigned to Aurora Prime stood empty, their digital signs replaced with red canceled labels. Behind closed doors, the airline's PR department issued carefully crafted statements about technical challenges and isolated incidents. But the narrative was no longer in their hands. In a quiet office in Seattle, a different airline executive was watching the collapse with interest. Velocity Air's CEO, Mara Windsor, sipped her coffee as she slid a slim envelope across her desk to her compliance chief. Inside were internal memos, training modules, and a series of photographs, all from Aurora Prime archives. They detailed customer optics management strategies, some of which directly referenced passenger profile adjustments that aligned uncomfortably close to discriminatory practices. "Send it to the ethics board anonymously," Mara instructed. Her voice was calm, but the glint in her eyes was sharp. Within hours, the FAA Ethics Division received an encrypted package. The documents were damning, painting a picture not of isolated mistakes, but of a corporate structure that quietly condoned biased treatment for years. At Aurora Prime headquarters, Caldwell read the first leaked headline in disbelief. "Leaked memos suggest pattern of discrimination at Aurora Prime." His legal team scrambled, but every denial seemed hollow as more evidence surfaced. In the Sentinel Operations Suite, Jonathan Parker reviewed the incoming flood of documents without visible reaction. His role wasn't to push the evidence, just to ensure it reached the right channels. For the first time in years, the weight of Aurora Prime's corporate machine shifted from dominance to defense, and the ground beneath them was still moving. By evening, market analysts weren't asking if Aurora Prime would recover. They were asking if it would survive. By midweek, the internet had turned Aurora Prime's scandal into a cultural flashpoint. The video from Flight 409, Samantha Blake standing over Eli and Maya, finger-pointed, voice cold, was on every major social platform. Clips replayed in endless loops on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. The caption varied, but the impact was the same. "You don't belong here." Cable news channels seized the moment. CNN hosted panel debates on systemic bias in aviation. ABC aired a primetime segment featuring passenger interviews. One woman from row 3 recounted, "I saw the tickets, they were valid. She moved them anyway." Aurora Prime's PR team scrambled to contain the fallout. Press releases citing ongoing internal review did little to calm the storm. Every statement was met with memes, hashtags, and furious comments. And then came the twist no one expected. On a Thursday evening broadcast, a popular investigative news program teased a special interview. Flight 409, Witness Breaks Silence. The camera cut to a studio where the host sat across from a man in a simple gray suit. His face was familiar, though most viewers couldn't place it right away. "I was seated in row 35, the man began calmly. "I recorded the incident as it happened." The host leaned forward. "And you are?" The man's eyes met the camera. "Daniel Reeves, former FAA Compliance Division. The studio audience gasped softly. Reeves continued, I was traveling on a personal ticket that day. I had no official capacity, but when I saw the interaction, I recognized a pattern I'd seen in reports for years. That's why I documented it. The host pressed. Did you expect this to escalate to what we're seeing now? Reeves shook his head. No, but I knew Aurora Prime couldn't keep pretending these were isolated incidents. This was systemic, and someone had to be watching. The clip went viral before the segment ended. Reeves's testimony lent credibility to every claim. Online, his name trended alongside hashtags #TheyBelongHere and #ReevesWitness. In row 32 of Flight 409, Maya had noticed Reeves's watchful eyes. Now, the rest of the world knew who he was. At Sentinel HQ, Jonathan Parker watched the interview from his office. His expression didn't change, but there was a faint sense of inevitability in his stillness. Reeves had played his part without ever being asked. Aurora Prime wasn't just facing public outrage. It was facing it with an expert witness on national television. The FAA's announcement dropped like a lightning strike. Effective immediately. All U.S.-bound carriers must comply with the Sentinel Protocol Charter. The text was clinical, but its implications were seismic. Airlines were now required to publish real-time passenger equity index scores. Every delay, every seating reassignment, every complaint, visible to the public. News outlets called it unprecedented. Industry executives called it destabilizing. Advocacy groups called it overdue. In Harlem, Jonathan Parker watched the live press conference from his office. The FAA's director credited recent incidents for accelerating the rollout. Jonathan didn't need them to say the name. The weight of Flight 409 hung in every pause. At Aurora Prime headquarters, Caldwell sat with legal advisors, reading the charter's clauses line by line. The reality was unavoidable. Compliance was no longer a choice. It was survival. 2 days later, the Aviation Ethics Summit convened in Washington, D.C. Dozens of executives, regulators, and media outlets filled a sleek conference hall. But the attention wasn't on the industry veterans. It was on two children seated in the front row, Maya and Eli Parker. When their names were called, Maya adjusted the microphone, her voice steady but clear. My brother and I were told we didn't belong in a seat we paid for. That wasn't just about two kids. It was about a system that allowed someone to think they could say it out loud and face no consequences. The room was silent. Maya's words cut sharper than any policy paper. Eli leaned forward, speaking into the mic. We didn't yell. We didn't fight. We just sat there. But the system fought for us. That's what Sentinel did. There was a swell of murmurs from the crowd, cameras flashing. Then Maya glanced toward the audience, her next words deliberate. And Sentinel didn't even use all of its tools. Jonathan, seated in the second row, raised an eyebrow slightly. The moderator leaned forward. What do you mean, Maya? Maya met his gaze. Sentinel has a level 2. It's stronger, more final. My dad says it's only for when the system refuses to change. The room shifted. Journalists scribbled furiously. Executives whispered to one another. Jonathan's face remained calm, but behind his composed expression, he knew exactly what she'd done. With one sentence, Maya had turned the summit into a stage for the next phase of reform, and hinted at a weapon no one outside a select few had ever heard of. The moderator tried to move on, but the damage, or perhaps the momentum, was already building. Headlines were forming before the panel ended. Sentinel Protocol Level 2. What is it? As the session closed, Jonathan placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. She looked up at him, her expression calm but determined. You weren't supposed to say that, he said quietly. They weren't supposed to say we don't belong, she replied. Jonathan didn't argue, because deep down, he knew she was right. The final day of the Aviation Ethics Summit was quieter than the others. The press frenzy had dulled to a low hum, but the tension in the air hadn't faded. Executives still huddled in corners. Regulators spoke in clipped tones. and camera crews stood ready in case another headline emerged. Jonathan Parker sat at the front of the hall, flanked by Maya and Eli. They were dressed simply, no staged pageantry, no excessive formality. Yet every lens in the room was drawn to them. When his name was called, Jonathan stood, holding a slim leather folder. Inside was the official FAA document, Sentinel Protocol Charter, ratified and enforced. The embossed seal glimmered under the lights as he handed it to Maya. "This," he said softly, his voice carrying through the hall, "is not just a rulebook. It's a promise, one we intend to keep." Maya took the folder with both hands, her expression a mix of pride and gravity. Eli leaned over to peek at the cover, eyes wide. "Does this mean no one can kick us out anymore?" Jonathan gave the faintest of smiles. "It means no one should, and if they try, the system will answer before we do." The crowd responded with restrained applause, polite but meaningful. As the ceremony wound down, most attendees began packing their notes, ready to return to the business of adapting or surviving the new reality Sentinel had imposed. Maya, however, stayed seated. She opened the folder, flipping through the thick formal language. Near the back, her eyes caught something unusual, a small, almost hidden page with a black emblem at the top. It wasn't like the rest of the charter. The title read, Sentinel Protocol, Level 2 Activation Framework. The language was technical, veiled, and deliberately vague. Terms like system override, permanent restriction, and federal enforcement chain stood out. She looked up at Jonathan, curiosity sharp in her gaze. "This, Level 2, is this the one I talked about?" Jonathan met her eyes for a long moment before answering. "It's the one no one talks about." Eli leaned in, frowning. "What's it for?" Jonathan closed the folder gently, his expression unreadable. "For when the system forgets what it just learned." The weight of the statement hung in the air. From the back of the room, journalists noticed the exchange. Cameras caught the moment. The charter in Maya's hands, the silent gravity on Jonathan's face. It sparked questions even before the event ended. By evening, headlines emerged online. Sentinel Level 2, hidden clause in FAA reform. Speculation surged. Was Level 2 a stronger enforcement mechanism? A fail-safe? A threat? Jonathan didn't offer any interviews. He left the summit with his children, walking past the reporters without a word. Outside, as they stepped into the cool DC air, Maya glanced at the folder again. Her fingers rested lightly on the page she wasn't supposed to see. "Is this over?" she asked. Jonathan adjusted his cuff, looking out toward the Capitol dome. "No, this is just the beginning." And somewhere deep within the Sentinel system, Level 2 remained dormant, waiting.